There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood doth lead on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in misery. This was Brutus to Cassius after they had killed Julius Caesar, urging him to go on to Philippi in Greece to oppose Mark Antony, a battle that they lost. So he was wrong. But the tide, it was the tide in the affairs of men. And he got it wrong. Anyway, I started a thread the other day. I was in an impish mood. It was essentially that consumers employ the employed, not bosses. That if the ones who can afford a Tesla stopped buying them, the billionaire who owns the company or whatever percentage of stock he owns, the CEO, would cut his or her workforce. I'm not picking on that particular CEO, just generally. That the billionaire / owner is foremost an investor, not the king. My metaphor was, rich people employ us on their yachts. They are the consumer then. When consumers stop buying, the profits stop and the paychecks stop. I knew it was a red rag to bulls, but I was taken aback by the nature of the opposition. It was so entirely rigid. He does employ them. How does he not employ them? I just answered the question in the post. No, you didn't. Yes, yes, I did. How does he not employ them? Answer the question. And then I gave up. It's still there, roaring away, basically. That is ridiculous. Everyone knows that is how it's always been. No, not really. Brains like rocks. It's all of a piece in the theory of what civilizations must do to make their civilians. We have the catastrophically failed communist model that conceals so far the catastrophic American model that necessitates these rock brains. They are objecting to the implications of what I said. There is no king. That's fine. That is debatable and useful in a culture that claims it had a revolution. It never had, but the level. There was a Louis, I remember this cartoon goose. I can't find it. It's so frustrating. Who would say things like, "Hey, Louis, he said a bad thing." That's the level of the dispute. It is true that of the many men in particular who aspire to be rich, some would like to be known as an employer. And once again, I'd say you want to employ the people who make you rich. Like some people like to be landlords. They like to feel powerful. They like people to be grateful to them, to doff their cap to them, such cliches. But if you can maintain the profit with fewer workers, you will let them go. In some movies I've seen, and some employers even tear up when they've had to fire somebody, and the noble employee says something like, "Oh, don't fret, boss, you tried your best, I'll be okay," and then he shoulders his bundle and walks off into the oaky sunset. I'd even say that it is the employee working for the consumer who employs the boss, keeps her in work, without getting his fingernails dirty. What makes him worthy? 40 million at birth? There has to be a vague sense of altruism or its facsimile in this bossing, rather like kings making much of their people. The czarist fantasy in which the czar and serf collude. Be sure there is no equality in this relationship, and that is what these disputers are telling me. They have no desire for equality in any relationship in their lives, and often the kings are quite deficient. All going to the same schools and parties in Newport weakens the brain like inbreeding. So much for them. They are essentially obsolete, unnecessary, so the myth has to harden. Now for ourselves, to continue the Shakespeare. The evangelizers have chosen their prosecutor, or the Democrats have chosen their candidate. I see nothing joyous in this person. I see fracker, colonial Islamophobe, But she's not Satan, they tell me. I have lived with Satan for a long time. He has a large following for whom we are Satan. What fun. Are they equally genocidal, or is there a good and bad genocider and she is it? A word of warning: to survive or slow down the march of climate destruction to survivable levels, we'll have to consume less. For rich nations, that will mean 25% of current fossil fuel gluttony and everything else. This will be a farther fall for the richer you are at the moment. So wealth and its vacuous values are obsolete too.